Good evening and welcome to EWTN's continuing live coverage of the 14th Ordinary Synod of Bishops. We are still in week one, which is dedicated to reflecting on challenges that are facing families all over the world at the present moment. Today, the Synod Fathers met in small groups, which were organized by language, in which they discussed part one of the Instrumentum Laboris, the working document of the Synod. I'd like to welcome on set with me now Delia Gallagher, a veteran Vatican correspondent. Delia, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
So nice to have you here. We've covered synods in the past, over the past three papacies, a lot of synods, which are generally not overly exciting, let's say, but the past two have been. What are your impressions of this synod so far?
Well, certainly a lot of anticipation for this one, mainly I think because we had the pre-synod, we had last year's synod, and the issues that were raised and the debates that came out of that synod were of interest to people even outside of the Catholic Church, and a lot of people weighing in on some of these topics. And in addition, I think we're under Pope Francis, who has raised expectation that there might be change and so on. So certainly from a secular perspective, there's more interest in this synod, which I think is palpable here, that you feel a little bit more that the message is not just going to the Catholic world, but it's going to the outside world, and that creates then also a problem within the Catholic world.
Right.
So,
but are they really saying misinterpretations?
It's very complex, this one, and therefore I think very interesting.
The media tends to focus on, let's say, the negative topics regarding marriage, marriage and divorce, let's say, and all that. But the Synod Fathers have been made clear from the get-go, and Pope Francis himself, and say his opening homily, even during the Vigil of Families before the Synod officially kicked off, the positive aspects of marriage, the very faith-based, the centrality of Christ in marriage and the Christian teaching of that. Can you comment on that? Like, there's so much negative media coverage of divorced and remarried and all of these things, but the church is trying to emphasize from the get-go what's good about Christian marriage.
Well, it's a difficult thing, possibly not so easily put into positive and negative, because obviously in emphasizing the positive, which is what they eventually want to arrive at, they are discussing how do we do that? Right. And one of the big discussions here is language.
Exactly.
And so if you have Cardinal A saying, I think we should use this language, and Cardinal B saying we should use this language, and there's a debate set up there, and by the way, it's a public debate because the cardinals themselves choose to speak to the media, clearly the media will interpret according to their own biases and according to their own visions. But I do think that the nature of this synod, which Pope Francis has also stressed, is to have a free dialogue, to speak freely.
Which can only be a good thing. Yeah.
Well, the hope is that it will eventually be a good thing. Obviously, it does create confusion and it creates worry for some people.
Right.
But I do think that the Pope tries to continually sort of remind them, he just did it yesterday, to say, it's okay, this is a protected space, this is under the Holy Spirit, it will be resolved.
It's not a parliament, this isn't Senate, and
we don't have to achieve a compromise on anything.
Right.
And I do think it's worth keeping in mind that, all church councils from the beginning have been hotly debated.
Right.
And
going back to the apostles, we have to remember, let's say,
sure.
These bishops are modern day apostles, and if you will, the first group was quite a varied group. We have fishermen, ex-tax collectors,
sure.
So
and
I mean,
discussing,
you can imagine this is normal.
Important issues of their time. So I think we have to be patient, certainly, with the process. But in terms of a negative vision versus a positive vision of the Catholic Church, let's say, I think that's just a result of trying to follow the different dialogues from the different bishops and what they want in terms of these issues, and in terms of projecting this more positive image, because of course the more positive image can't be just a superficial one. Right.
And they're getting into the nitty-gritty, and they're talking about the language. I like that you brought that up, because language, we're in day 2, 3 of the Synod, and so they're already talking about the importance of language. And I want to play a clip for you. During today's press briefing, there was Archbishop Charles Chaput, of course, is the Archbishop of Philadelphia, where they just had the World Meeting of Families. He had some pointed remarks about the importance of language and the fact that not all of the Synod Fathers are understanding what they're receiving, which was basically in Italian. Let's listen to this clip and get your reaction.
Now, there are concerns in the sense that does the document really reflect the experience of the universal church, or is it too much of a Western European, Northern Hemisphere kind of document. There was some discussion of that this morning. Language that might be offensive in Western Europe and North America might be language that's necessary for clarity in places like Africa and Asia. And so I think this is an international meeting of the Catholic Church, all of us, and it's important for the work of the Synod not to be narrowly focused on concerns that are primarily the concerns of my country, for example. I think we need to deal with those concerns, but that's not the only thing. Now, there are concerns.
So this points out, Archbishop Chaput was pointing out that language is very different throughout the world. I just said something that might be offensive as we use this language to maybe come up with pastoral plans to deal with divorce and remarriage or same-sex attraction. Something is offensive in one country but not in another.
Well, I'll give you an example of that one of the cardinals shared with me. From the last report from last year when they said welcoming homosexuals, and he said that the African bishop said we can't use the word welcome. We could use the word respect, for example.
Okay.
But what's important about what what Archbishop Chaput said today is they often can't understand the Italian text.
Exactly.
That was a surprise to hear.
Yeah.
And that the translations are not always accurate. So this is a really basic problem that was also echoed by the bishop from Lille, who was there from France, who said, yes, there are problems with the French translation. I mean, this is a primary language issue. If he says, we're voting on serious issues that in a language that we can't understand. So
right.
That's one aspect of that. The other aspect that he alluded to is the question that the Instrumentum Laboris reflects only the concerns of the Western Church. And that's perfectly legitimate coming from an African country or South American country, for example, when it says in the Instrumentum Laboris that Catholic marriages are decreasing, and the Africans say, well, actually, in Africa they're increasing.
Right.
We have a problem of enculturation. We have a problem of polygamy. These are different problems.
Right.
The bishop from Peru today said we have the problem of extreme poverty in families.
Yes.
So I think he's right, the Archbishop, to point out that this document already shows signs of not representing entirely the universal church. Of course, it's a difficult thing probably for them to make it entirely.
Exactly, and it's kind of put on them like, here it is, here's the document, now let's vote, and they can't even really understand what it is they have in front of them. And I like how you point out the translations. Some of the cardinals are noticing, and the bishops, that the translations aren't exactly faithful, which is a huge problem when what they're talking about in the first 3 days of Synod is the importance of language, because once this trickles down to the diocesan level, an ambiguous term could lead to an ambiguous pastoral practice.
Yeah, I mean, it's
in
clear,
these areas.
Language is vital on all fronts, and if, first of all, they can't understand the text, then that needs to be resolved, and I think it can be easily. Then the Secretariat of State, they have plenty of people who are very good at translating, so probably just more attention needs to be put on the translations.
Yeah.
And then the additional problem of changing the actual pastoral language and that sort of thing, which is one of the big things that everybody is watching.
Yeah.
How is that going to affect, or is it going to affect, doctrine? That's one of their main problems, and it's a big question.
Right. I want to hear in Archbishop Chaput's own words what he had to say. His voice is concerned about what we were just saying about the translations into English and the difficulties that arise regarding this unprecise language. Let's listen.
Difficulties we had was, as we looked at the document, was some of the bishops wanted to analyze it word by word, and it isn't the official document. We have the English translation, which in some ways doesn't match the Italian, which is the official version, because they were worried about, what does this word mean to our people? Can it be misinterpreted? Will it be used against the church rather than in favor of the church? So those questions came up.
So the small group discussions will continue this week, and as he pointed out, many people were asking them questions during the presser. What about this? What about that? And they kept saying, hey, wait, we're just at day 3, folks. We're only at number 9 in the Instrumentum Laboris, which is, of course, the working document for the Synod. So there will be much more on all of these topics. One of the topics we heard about quite a bit at the last Synod was the Church's pastoral approach to homosexuals, people who are attracted to the same sex. And this is something to be affronted and embraced or treated at the diocesan level, something that they're probably all going to discuss. Do you think the secular press and the people in general understand that the Church is not against the homosexual tendencies, let's say, they're not condemning or judging you, but it states that it's acting upon the tendency that is sinful. Separating someone can say, I have this tendency, but as a Catholic, I know that I can't act on it. I must be chaste. Do you think the secular press is understanding that?
No.
Difference?
I mean,
No.
I don't think that distinction holds much value for them. But let's say also that in the question of language, the problem is that it's not just the homosexual acts which are a problem. It is also the tendency, which is a problem. It says that the homosexual orientation is intrinsically disordered.
Right.
That is one of the things that they were looking at least last year. We saw in the interim report came out this new language about talking about problems of translation. What created the fuss last year was this interim report, which had language in it more accepting and welcoming of gays, and there was a mistranslation there with the English and the Italian, because it said valuing in English, valuing a sexual orientation, when in the Italian it said evaluating a sexual orientation.
And this is a very important distinction, right? So the church wants to be pastoral and merciful in reaching out. I think we'll be getting some directives on how pastors can do that, to be more welcoming to them as people. People of God,
and I think the Pope has gone a long way towards doing that. And what the bishops and cardinals are now trying to figure out is, what do we write down about it?
Right, tricky language. Here we come again with the language, and we'll be staying tuned for much more from the Synod bishops as they continue to discuss these matters. We have to take a break, but stay tuned for more live coverage from Rome. Right now, we're going on our.
No. You have to take note that I am not. I do not know what is happening in the Synod.
Well, just your general impressions.
Do not presume that I know what is happening inside. I'm not there.
Welcome back to EWTN News' continuing coverage of the Synod on the Family. I have the great pleasure to welcome now to the set His Eminence Cardinal Francis Arinze, former head of the Congregation for Divine Worship and the Discipline of the Sacraments. Your Eminence, welcome, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Your Eminence, you live in Rome and you've participated in past synods. Now, we've just gotten started with this one. Just from the remarks you've heard from the Pope's homily or the tone that has come out maybe in news reports, what's your general impressions so far of this synod?
Now, I must not pretend that I know what is happening in the Synod Hall, because I'm not inside it.
Right.
But, obviously, from what the Holy Father said, we get it clear. The topic of the Synod is most important. The role of the family, its mission in the church and in the world. Very important, and with the Holy Father, we are on the correct track, because the family has great importance for church and for society.
Exactly. You know, the media tends to emphasize the marriages that fail, while the Synod Fathers are looking ways to keep those marriages from failing. One way to do that is through good and better marriage preparation. Would you agree, getting more involved with the couple before they actually get married? Do you think this would help them stay together?
Preparation for marriage has great importance, definitely. The Synod is not on marriages that failed.
Right.
The Synod is on the family, marriage and the family. And therefore, the Synod will encourage good families, happy families, stable families, which means the preparation becomes very important. Young people need preparation, not only catechetical on faith, and that is irreplaceable, because if a person doesn't believe in God, hasn't strong faith in Christ and the church, the living of the sacrament of matrimony will not go well. Then they also need instruction on human virtues. They need instruction that medical doctors can give them, like Dr. Billings and his wife from Australia. All these are necessary and very useful areas of preparation. Human contact, how to live with another person, how to sacrifice what you want, how to get along with other people, and not insist always on self, self, self.
This is something that dominates today's culture, wouldn't you say? This kind of focus on the self. Pope Francis is always encouraging us to get out of ourselves, to reach out, to be with others. And he's talked about creating communities of families, almost, if you will, families that are missionaries to other families, because so often families are disjointed or spread around the world, but families need other families to grow and to stay together.
You are right. The family is not just an object of evangelization, but also a subject. That is, the members of the family evangelize. Husband and wife share the faith with each other and help each other to grow. Parents and children, parents towards their children share the faith. Indeed, the Second Vatican Council calls the family the domestic church, the church of the home, the place where religion begins. Ever before you bring the children to church, the parents, the home they create is their first little church. Very important. And the family should also evangelize other families, as the Pope has said, and also St. John Paul II, because a family can help another family. The families with more experience can help the younger families. There is no problem seen that was never seen before. Therefore, young couples will gain if there is some way in which the more experienced couples stay with them, talk with them, advise them, listen to them, share problems and challenges with them. Yes.
As a pastor yourself, for the families who are watching, this is being broadcast all over the world. A concrete example of something they can do as a family that can strengthen them. And, you know, with social media pulling cell phones and computers, everyone's getting a little bit to something like prayer. What would you suggest that they could do to strengthen their family bond right now?
Yes, you mentioned prayer, and it is irreplaceable. You just imagine a family where they would get together in the morning, no matter how brief, because they have their work, a few prayers before they disperse to their various school, job, work, also, and especially at meals. When they take lunch together, or if they're not together at lunch, at least supper together, father, mother, children, and the children see the parents take the prayer seriously. I know one family. This man is president of a small university in the United States, and he has, I think, about 8 children only.
Wow, wonderful.
And he gets together with them on Sunday, and they say the Vespers from the church book. And each morning, before the children go to school, he prays over their children, naming them one by one. Father, mother, children are together.
Isn't that wonderful?
It's better than a lecture given by a theologian from the university.
Yes. My mom would always say, I know you're learning catechism at school, but the seeds that are sown at home, that soil is more fertile because it's in the home. So it's easier to catechize children at home than maybe just relying on catechism maybe in the school, wherever they happen to be getting it. That soil of the family is very fertile soil for raising religious children.
Of course, we need teaching the faith in school and in church and other areas, but the family is irreplaceable. It is there that religion begins. And the parents who are convinced about our Catholic faith and they share it with their children in the home, they are doing marvelous work.
You mentioned something earlier I'd like to bring up. It is very clear that the Church does not permit the use of contraception in marriage, but the Church supports something that's called natural family planning. And you mentioned this before, a way to responsibly respond to God's call as you have children. I mean, so contraception is not on the table. That's not being discussed. But can we promote more this natural family planning, God's plan of a way to have a family?
Yes. And we must make clear that it isn't church law not to engage in contraception or abortion. It isn't the Pope that made the law.
Right.
It's God's law. The Pope and the bishops and priests only interpret the law of God. Now, there is, as you have rightly said, natural family planning, where doctors have scientifically worked it out. Most famous are Dr. Billings and his wife from Australia. They are now dead. And they are excellent doctors. They have great link with the Catholic University fertility section of Gemelli Hospital here in Rome. And they have scientifically worked out a guide so that the spouses know the days in which the woman is not going to conceive. So that means following the law of God as inserted in human nature, the doctor helps the spouses so that they can have relations with full respect for the law of God, for the dignity of the woman, and demanding also some measure of self-control. Oh, yes.
Oh, yes,
because
which is hard to preach in today's world.
But there is no going to heaven without self-control.
This is not a popular message, right? With the young...
Well, Christ has said, if you will follow me, you take up your cross daily and follow me. Yes. Anyone who says, I will not take up the cross, then you are saying, I'm not going to follow Christ. Just tell me whom you will follow. Exactly.
You're from Nigeria. And there's a group of African cardinals who are in Rome now for the Synod, and we met with them for a moment today. They got together as a group, all the Synod fathers who are participating in the Synod. But what challenges are facing the families in your home country? Because it's different. We have Synod bishops from all over the world. Some problems are common to all families, but some of them are specific to certain areas of the world. What about Nigeria?
That is true. Apart from general problems all around the world, selfishness, individuals who will not control themselves, we can say in our own context, the status of the woman, our Catholic faith helps so that the man see that these are two persons equal in dignity, complementary, but equal. Yes. Because the traditional society from which these Christians come gives the man a higher place in society. So that's one area.
Okay.
In touching also inheritance, in our culture in Igbo land in Nigeria, it's the boys who inherit. The girls don't inherit from their parents, not as discrimination, but the society saw them as those about to have their husbands, and they leave their home and go to their husbands. The men remain. So, but Christianity has to look at it again. Why can't a daughter get her own share of the property of the parents? That's another area. Then another area is if a man and a woman marry and they have no child, it is a big temptation for the man. His friends say to him, all your money, who will inherit them? Right. You get another wife. So the temptation to get another wife in order to have a child, especially a boy.
Okay.
And sometimes the wife is even in support that they get another one. He doesn't say to the wife, go away, but he gets another one. Now, Christianity cannot accept that.
No.
Because it's one man, one woman. It's not church law, it's divine law. So Christianity helps in this matter. Polygamy, we call it. So it is among the points the bishops, some bishops of Africa mentioned.
Yeah, I wanted to mention your book. Not your book, it's a collection of articles by, so it's called Christ's New Homeland, Africa, Contribution to the Synod on the Family by African Pastors. Just quickly, we have about 30 seconds. Just kind of tell us what jewels are inside this book.
This is not my book.
No, you're a contributor.
Well, I wrote the preface. That means I'm very happy with what the bishops have said. Obviously, I'm very happy. It is about 10, 11 bishops and cardinals of Africa speaking on the family from different angles.
Okay.
And the joy in the family, what the Synod can do to help good families to be even better, to help wounded families to get healing, to listen to polygamist families, to help them to live our faith, and to help the situation of the woman, all that. So it is good news.
It's good
Indeed,
news,
I
and
would tell
it's
our
good
people,
reading.
if you don't have a copy, sell your shoes and buy one.
You can get it at Ignatius Press. Your Eminence, thank you so much for joining us on the program today. That's our show. Remember, for the latest on the Synod, check out our special Synod page on EWTN.com. Follow us on Twitter at EWTN and send us your questions and comments using the hashtag EWTN Synod. We want to hear from you. And as always, for more information about EWTN, TV, radio, our Facebook page, and our app, visit EWTN.com. We'll be back tomorrow with our continuing Synod coverage. I'm Mary Shovlin. Good night from Rome.